So welcome back to our another, in fact, first official devlog. In the last one, I introduced you to our game and our team. I explained what we are working on and who does what. If you are interested in indie team roles and their responsibilities, please go check that out. For this devlog, I have prepared a topic of level design, such an interesting and wide subject. Just a small note before I will fully lean into it. I am not a level design expert. It covers such a lot and it would be bold to pretend that I am professional level designer. But I will try my best to give you some valuable insight from a perspective of our roguelike project. Yeah, that's it. Let's start. What I even mean when I say level design is a wide subject. First of all, it varies a lot with the genre. You would approach the design of your 2D platformer differently to the one of a huge open world 3D RPG. If I were to simplify it, let's say the process of the whole design gets more complex with dimensions being used in your game. Our game is isometric, so I will be focusing mainly on this dimension. That's where I think a lot of value of this video comes in. While most of the accessible level design resources are either for 2D or 3D games, but not these in between. What I understand as a level design is not just a layout of blocks forming a path where the player needs to go. It goes beyond. In fact, I think everything in the game starts and builds upon level design. It's like the roots of a huge tree. Without them, everything would lean down and fall apart. Through a well-crafted level design, you will tell a meaningful story. Level design is also a glue which holds all the big schemes together. It sets the difficulty of the game, it provides the player with all the resources, it scales the length of the whole game. The value of the level design is undeniably high. So let's get a little bit deeper into all these mechanisms. Let's discuss how they work and why they are important. Let me start with what is maybe the hardest, choices. And I'm not only talking about the choices of the player, probably you, but also choices I have to make while working on the levels. We are not creating the game for a single person, which means there will be plenty of preferences. There are players who just love to slaughter. There are players who play only to explore. I must also ensure the experience of one run playthrough is not too long, neither too short. While roguelikes do not have an optional difficulty, we also must make sure the difficulty is adaptable and less skilled players can play the same game alongside those who have a lot of experience. So it's not simple to hear out every request and need, while often the desires are contradictory. But believe it, we try. The best way how to tackle the choices I have to undergo is by sharing them with the player, you. Let him or you decide what they want to get from the game. For example, most of our hallways connecting battle arenas split into different optional routes. Usually, one of the options is harder, but yields more valuable loot. Hereby, the player can decide on his own whether he wants to take the risk with the vision of making his life easier in the future. This way, all of you guys are choosing your own difficulty every moment of the playthrough, not me. Same goes with exploration. While I am working on the marketing of our game, I can see how many players desire for a Diablo 2 Reborn. But sadly to them, what we are creating is a roguelike, not a slasher RPG. Roguelikes are much faster and shorter. I cannot afford to create a huge room with an exit which will take hours to find, but I can still offer a lot of optional exploration to those who seek it. I can create a motivation for the exploration through interesting scenery and extra loot, but you are the one who takes the initiative whether to just follow the main path and get it all done quickly, or try to squeeze the most out of every place there is. And also, giving the player the option to make a decision makes the game much more engaging. After all, interactivity is what makes games stand out next to movies and books. Another thing I need to bring up is environmental storytelling and the architecture of the dungeon. I am no way an architect, but I would still say I'm constructing the dungeon based on an elaborate plan. What I mean by that is that every second of the design I am trying to think of how would the inhabitants of this place approach building such a structure. You, as a designer, need to deliver the feeling of the game being beyond the player. Something was happening there before the hero entered, something will be happening there after he will leave. Player is just a visitor. And on top of that, what I really enjoy as a designer is that all of this storytelling, or better say story understanding, is highly subjective. If I leave a detail of a destroyed statue somewhere, it's up to you whether you will think some huge monster ran over it, or maybe the old priests denied the gods and put the statues down as a sign of pillage. Like this, everyone ends up with a slightly different, unique experience, and that's awesome. If I combine this storytelling with valid decision making, I end up with a space which the player will want to visit again. Which is crucial for a roguelike. Roguelikes are highly repetitive and their environment is procedural, meaning the environment is somewhat lined up randomly. This presents us with another dilemma. We want the dungeon to be like a maze, but at the same time, it must be memorable. It's important that players can learn from previous mistakes. As I was talking about some paths being more difficult than others, we don't want to make the decision about where to go a wild guess. We need to give the player an opportunity to try and discover, figure out and understand, and next time he can make a much more reliable choice. For this, I need to make sure all the crossroads will be mysterious but recognizable. And while the random procedural generation is very helpful with the replayability, it is also undermining my striving to make the dungeon's architecture meaningful. It's hard to make a justification to why a sacrificial room follows after a dining room, and these two are being connected randomly through the code. For that reason, we use thematic levels. It's the process of putting all man-made rooms in level 1 and all the organic places in level 2 and so on. This way, we have at least a slight control over the flow of the environment. But you will never avoid this problem fully and you will always end up with some funny mashups. Another thing is the diversity of the gameplay. Much of the diversity you will achieve through game mechanics like combat system, unique hooks, etc. But some diversity again relies on the level design. For our demo purpose, we already have 51 different scenes. In every scene, we want to ensure at least a slightly unique experience compared to these you can experience in all the other scenes. So not a single trap puzzle in the game will feel the same. For example, this puzzle will be solved by patience and good timing. This puzzle by precision and swiftness. And this one? Well, this one is for maniacs. Same goes for battle arenas. Some are tight and claustrophobic and try to deny your mobility. Some allow you to take the advantage of strategic low walls where you can shoot at distant enemies. With our philosophy, we don't want to be adding content by repetition, but through honestly well-crafted fresh and new design every time. Sure, concrete traps and enemies will repeat, but their arrangement, timing and all other settings will differ. So forth, the solution of how to tackle the situation of the current battle or trap puzzle. Now to close all this theory up, let's get a bit more specific so you can see some real behind the scene process. Let me rewind a little bit to the beginning. I have stated that the design for specific genres varies. I have simplified it a lot by saying it gets more complicated with the dimensions being used. What I meant by that is that for a 3D project you usually need more people working on a level, because the player usually interacts with the environment in more different ways than just simply progressing through chronologically. Very often, big teams of 3D shooters and RPGs need at least 2 phases to create a level, so-called blockout and something called environmental design. You usually don't need to split that for 2D games, while you immediately work with and place the final blocks visible in the game. By that, I don't want to bring down 2D level design. There are other obstacles which are lacking in 3D design. I am also doing all the level composition immediately with the environment assets from our library provided by Lucas without the blockout. Not only that I can afford to do this because I am the only one working on level design, but it is also faster and sometimes even mentally easier. But even my personal process has some steps and rules, like start with the unique differentiating gameplay idea first, then continue with the shape, then place traps and enemies, and then at the last moment add decorations. Having some personal rules is not only helpful to keep the game coherent, but it will also ensure that you are creating an original, distinct product to other games. I, for example, like to disrupt the comfort of the player by prioritizing realism over convenience. Is this pillar in the way for a simple walkthrough? Yes. But would this pillar be in the middle of the way if this place really existed? Yes. So I'm leaving it there. Sure, some balance between flow and realism must be kept, where flow is honestly more important, but subvert the expectations, make the player vigilant, don't give away anything for free. That's the power of indie. We don't need to please the mainstream, we can afford to do things unconventionally. And with this message, I would like to end this video. I hope you learned something new or that you at least had a good time. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I will appreciate any hints. Until next time, enjoy the most important game we all are playing, called life. Bye!